On behalf of Peace Corps, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for today's Rock Your Profile session from LinkedIn. Please note that the webinar is being recorded. During the webinar, please drop any questions that you have into our Q&A box and look in the chat for relevant links and additional information. We have received your questions submitted during registration, and we will be addressing them throughout. I would like to now introduce our presenter today, Kelly Finzer, Senior Account Director from LinkedIn.
Thanks, Kenya. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Finzer, and I'm one of our Senior Account Directors here at LinkedIn. And my role is to partner with federal agencies on their strategies to recruit and retain top talent. And I support the Peace Corps as they're thinking about how to find the right folks to work for Peace Corps, but also recruit volunteers. And today I'm excited to be a part of your return experience as you're thinking about coming back, getting your LinkedIn profile stood up and starting to work, go back into the job market. And so I have a slide deck prepared for today. We will start in the slide deck and I'll have some talking points for you. The slides will be sent over afterwards. I know that's often a question folks ask, so know that you will be able to get a copy of the slides. And then as time allows, we'll plan to go into LinkedIn in real time and look at a couple of profiles in real time, just so that way, hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier to translate what you're seeing in the quote unquote classroom into how you would use it in a real life experience. I think that's everything that I wanted to share to kick it off, but please, again, feel free to drop questions in the chat. And just so you know, typically the way I moderate chats for these types of sessions is I will try to take a glance at your questions at the end of every slide. And if it's something that I feel like we'll touch on later, I'll probably table your question until we get to that later point. But if it's something that really closely aligns with what's on the slide and I know I won't come back to it, I will answer that in real time for you. So without further ado, our agenda for today will be getting to know LinkedIn. I'll give you a little bit of background on who we are as an organization. We'll then talk about your profile and how you can really use it to tell your story and how you can use it to take that next step beyond a traditional resume. Then we'll talk about how you can use LinkedIn beyond just having a profile. You'll hear in a couple of minutes that we are so much more than just a place to look for jobs. We are meant to be a professional community. So we'll talk a little bit about what does that mean for you. And then the last part of the call for today will be looking in the live LinkedIn website, both for how to build out your own network and how to think about upgrading your LinkedIn profile. And so as we're getting started, first up, why LinkedIn? Who is LinkedIn? And how can we be helpful for you? And so the first thing I always like to share with folks when we are talking about LinkedIn is that our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And we do this through our mission of connecting the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. And so what this means for you, and you can see up here on the slide, is that globally, our membership has 1 billion members. We've got about 67 million organizations using LinkedIn to share about their organization, to recruit talent. And because of that, we've got a pretty good sense of what's happening in the talent economy in real time. And so that means that when it comes to thinking about things like what kind of skills are developing, how are skills for jobs changing over time, well, how are jobs changing over time, we're able to get a good pulse on that. So you can see here that we've mapped 41,000 skills. The other big thing is that we are a great place for you to build that professional community. So as you're thinking about re-entering an industry, LinkedIn is a really good place to understand what kind of trends have been happening in the industry and to be able to network with people who might be able to refer you for a job in the future. And so those are a couple of the big things to think about. As we are going through the next few slides, we're going to start talking about how to tell your story. And I will try to point out tips and tricks, places for you to both build out your story in a way that will help you connect with hiring managers in the future, but also ways that will help make it a lot easier for recruiters to find you as well. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about your profile, which is really meant to be your story. And so couple of things here that I always encourage people to think about when it's your LinkedIn profile. So first of all, this is not meant to be a copy and paste of your resume. Your resume serves a very specific purpose in terms of it's often used to apply for jobs, and it's going to be a bullet of your accomplishment, maybe a bulleted list of your accomplishments. Your LinkedIn profile helps you go beyond that and becomes a digital representation or a digital portfolio of you and your work. And so what's cool about it is LinkedIn offers you the capacity to do more storytelling, to really bring to life the experiences that you've had, and to help show when you're talking about that impact. How did you get to that impact? And so first couple of things here are going to be kind of, we'll call it easing into the profile. First thing I always recommend to folks is to make sure that you have a profile picture. The profile picture is really important because it helps start to build that one-to-one connection when people are looking through your profile. If you're thinking about networking with someone, I don't know if you've ever done a coffee chat with someone you hadn't met before, but I've often used LinkedIn to be able to pull up that profile so that way I knew who I was looking for if I was going to meet them in person. And so couple of tips here with your LinkedIn profile photo. So first of all, you want a photo that just has you in it. The goal with the photo is to help build that one-to-one connection. If you are someone who wants to have an image that has multiple people in it, we do have a banner image available on your profile, and that's a better place. So if you're thinking about your storytelling and you wanted to include that photo, the banner photo is the place for multiple people. Your profile photo is meant to be just you. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it can be a little unique to telling part of your story. So for example, at one point in time, we had a group of Starbucks baristas that actually wrote their name on a cup and held their cup up next to their face, kind of like if you think about going into a Starbucks, it's pretty common that your name gets written on your cup, and it's kind of a unique part of the Starbucks culture. And so that was one of the ways that they chose to make it a little bit more unique to them. So don't feel like this has to be a professional headshot. You just want something that is good, a good clear picture of you. You want it to be high resolution, good lighting, so that way it's easy to see who you are. And then what you'll notice up here on the screen from the slide deck is that you do have some capabilities through the LinkedIn platform to edit your photo a little bit. So know that that's available to you as well. But if you take nothing else away from this particular section, photo of just you. Okay, I'll double check. I don't think anything's been dropped into the Q&A yet. Oh, nope, just kidding. I do see one question in the Q&A, it looks like. Glasses on or glasses off in the pic? That is a great question. I think that's really going to be up to you in terms of if that's a part of how you want to be perceived. Because so like, for example, I wear glasses. I also have contacts. All of my pictures are of me in contacts because that's when I'm out in public. I generally am wearing contacts. But I think it's perfectly fine that if you're someone who normally wears glasses, that would be perfectly fine to include here too. I have friends that do that as well. But great question. And thank you for being the first one. No one ever wants to go first when it comes to asking questions. Okay, so first up, we've added our profile photo. Next thing we're going to look at is I always recommend including a recording of your name. And so you can do this now with a mobile device. You just, there's a little button that you can pull up on the LinkedIn app and that you can pull it. You usually record about it takes about 10 seconds, hold the phone about 4 inches away from your mouth. But I think the reason it's really important to do this is, again, when you're thinking about networking, it's a really great way to help the other person feel at ease to know that they know how to address you. So if you have a nickname that's maybe not abundantly apparent from your profile or anything like that, they know how to address you. When I'm talking to recruiters and to hiring managers, I often coach them to record their name as well, because thinking about someone in your shoes, if you're going into an interview, it helps a lot to have confidence that you know how to address the person that you're interviewing with. So I highly recommend recording your name. It's an easy way to help create more sense of community, make it a little bit easier for you when you're entering those types of situations that sometimes can be a little higher stress. Okay. And then once we've got some of those basics set up, the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is how do we start telling that story of you? And so when I think about your LinkedIn profile, there are really two big sections where you start to tell the story of who you are and the type of work you do. The first is the summary section or the about section. The second section will be your experience section. And so when we are thinking about those two pieces, I would tease them out to be a little bit different in terms of the summary or the about section is your elevator pitch. It's meant to be higher level. What has been some of the backbone of your experience, maybe why you've chosen some of those experiences and what you're hoping to do broadly. And then you can use the experience section to do the deep dive on what you actually did in each role that you've had. And so we'll come back to the experience section, but I want to dig in a little bit more to the compelling summary right now. And so what you will see here is high level. We recommend elevator pitch. You're going to focus on career aspirations and accomplishments. And then 40 words or so. You want it to be short and sweet because you don't need to include all of your accomplishments, but you want it to be just enough to highlight your talents. And so one of the things that I know the Peace Corps teams talked a little bit about and that we talked about as we were preparing for today is that Peace Corps volunteers are typically really focused on ethical storytelling. And this is a good place to start thinking through where, how you might thread some of the work that you've done and back into your story in a way that's going to make sense both for the supporting the folks that you've worked with and telling your story. So I think we've got a couple of links on that we're going to be able to share with everybody. So make sure you check that out. But again, when you are thinking about your summary section, it's meant to be really high level. And I do see we have a recommendation here or a question here about recommendation on pronouns. I think it's great to include them if you're comfortable doing so. A lot of the LinkedIn profile is going to end up being how exactly you choose to answer. It's going to be based off of your comfort level and what's going to make the most sense for you. But I think it's great to include the pronouns if you're comfortable doing so. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pivot us over to the detailing your experience section, and then I will try to give an example of thinking about the summary section versus the experience section and how that might play out for you. But so what I always tell folks when they start to think about their experience section, and this is where you're going to break down the jobs that you've had, maybe if it's been an internship experience, maybe if it's been you worked a couple of years full time, or in this case, this is where you can put that volunteer experience that you've had with Peace Corps. I know that there is a volunteer section on your profile, but we talked through this a little bit as the team with Peace Corps, and we all agree that we think the right place for you to put your volunteer experience with Peace Corps is up as a part of your regular experience. And so big things to keep in mind when you're telling your professional story. I typically recommend about a 2 to 3 short paragraph structure here, where you might use the first paragraph to set some context for the type of work you were doing. So again, thinking about some of that ethical storytelling, what is the context of the type of work you were doing? Then maybe your second paragraph is going to zoom in a little bit on the type of actual work you did there, and you might finish it with one of the accomplishments that you've had here. And so when I think about my experience section on my profile, the way I might build it out is starting off by saying that I work with LinkedIn's federal government team, and my role is really focused on helping the federal government recruit and retain the top talent and the right people to help move federal policy forward. So in my particular role, I partner one-to-one with talent acquisition teams and one-to-one with learning and development teams to help them create a strategy to put their information in front of the right types of candidates so that they're getting qualified applicants. And then making sure that once we've brought the right people in, we're helping them acquire the skills that they need as this world of skills is changing. And so my great accomplishment has been helping the federal government transform their talent strategy. And so if you think about that, that's more of a deep dive on a specific type of experience. And then going back to that summary slide where we were talking higher level aspirations, my summary might be something like, I'm Kelly Finzer. I've worked in people-focused careers for the past decade. Early in my career, I was focused on matching fundraisers and donors with goals that are with their passions for philanthropic investment. And now I'm really focused on helping federal talent leaders be able to find the right people to help build out their organization. And so you can kind of see how that example is a little bit higher level, not as specific about what my day-to-day is, but is still focused around that people-centered piece. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I know I've said a lot, and these two pieces almost always have a lot of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and double check what's coming into the questions here, just so that way we can try to get these answered for you. I'm seeing a question of no bullets in the experience section. I would recommend avoiding them unless it's really the only way to cleanly tell your story. Because again, this is where if you think about the resume as being really, really focused on 1, 2, 3 accomplishments, maybe, I would say this is your opportunity to tell it as an actual story and let people actually read it. Okay, so I'm seeing another great question here. Many PCVs, while they're serving or working for another partner NGO, should that go under volunteer experience or work experience? And should that go under the partner NGO's name as the employer, or should it go under Peace Corps? And so one of the things that's really great about LinkedIn is that you can actually list two current experiences at the same time or two experiences at the same time. And so I think in this case, I would be inclined to list both. I would very much keep Peace Corps on your LinkedIn profile for a couple of reasons. First of all, in a few minutes, I'll talk about searching for returned Peace Corps volunteers as people you might network with. It's going to be a great way for you and other returned Peace Corps volunteers to find each other in the future. So I'd highly recommend keeping Peace Corps on your profile. Another thing is I know for federal government hiring, being a Peace Corps member can sometimes help you jumpstart in the federal government hiring pipeline. So I think keeping both on there is going to be really good because you want that Peace Corps brand. I also think if you worked with an NGO and built really strong connections there, that's good to be a part of that network too. And so keep in mind, you can have two experiences at the same time. So you could set it up so that way you have two volunteer roles at the same time, or you could mention your NGO's name in your Peace Corps volunteer if you don't want to have two, but I think it's perfectly fine to have two in this circumstance. Okay. And then one other question that I've had dropped in is if you've been recently laid off, how do you represent this on your LinkedIn profile? And so I think that question is going to depend a little bit on your personal level of comfort with people knowing what's happened to you. I do know that many people will write a post when they're laid off and share a little bit about their experience, what it was like, and what they're hoping to do next. There's also, we will talk about this in just a moment, a banner that says #open-to-work that you can add to your profile. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that banner in a moment. So if you're open to it being really public, you can absolutely do that. If you would prefer it to be a little bit more private, then I would recommend, we'll talk a little bit about how to indicate to recruiters that you're actively seeking a role now. And that would probably be a good place to start. And then the other thing is with your summary experience, I think that's a really great place for you to speak more to what you're hoping to do next and how you're really envisioning what we at LinkedIn refer to as the next play. So thinking about that next job. Okay. So we've talked a lot about high level. This is our vision. This is who I am as a person. This is my elevator speech and who I am. And then we got a little bit more specific to talk through some of the specific types of experience that we have. So one of the things that makes LinkedIn really unique is that you can actually be very creative about how to tell your story. So you can do things like upload videos, upload presentations as a way of helping to give a more visual and a little bit of a deeper understanding of your story. And so I think our Peace Corps team here is going to drop some examples of rich media in the chat that you can use. So one thing I always tell folks here is that it's okay to include media that you didn't create yourself or doesn't just feature you. And by that, what I mean is, I know, for example, when I came to LinkedIn, I came in through our Unlock program. It's a special program designed to help people who don't have sales experience come into LinkedIn. They go through a training program and then they go out and become sellers. And because the Unlock program is really unique, I usually get a lot of questions about it. So I have the Unlock program linked on my LinkedIn profile, even though I didn't create it and I'm not actively involved in it today. It's more of a, here's a little bit more about my background and my story, so that way other folks can read about it. And so in the case of one of our Peace Corps volunteers here, you might think about if there's a video that's open to the public that can be widely shared, that might be something that you would include that speaks to your work a little bit, even if you're part of a bigger project and you're not in the video, that's okay. But thinking about that as an opportunity to share a little bit more of your story. Okay. And I see that there is another question in the chat. I am going to come back to that at the end of our conversation today. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about building out your story in terms of high-level summary into experience and then how to really round it out with media. One of the things, though, that I think is on a lot of people's minds right now is the world of AI and how is technology changing, how are skills changing, and things like that. And one of the things that's really unique about a LinkedIn profile is that you can add specific skills to your profile. And I thought it might be interesting as we're talking about skills to give you a couple of ideas for skills you might not have thought of as being super worthwhile, especially in the world where everyone's talking about AI. And do you have AI skills? But one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is that the skills required for jobs are going to change by an average of 65% by 2030. So 6 years from now, we're going to see dramatically different skills needed in terms of some of those technical skills. But what we're seeing as the most in-demand skills today, and I suspect this will hold pretty true, is that coming back to some of those soft skills, some of those things that you've probably spent a lot of time learning over the past couple of years are going to continue to be really important skills. So when we think about Peace Corps volunteers, I am certain many of you have lots of experience with building communication skills, leadership skills, managing projects, teamwork, just knowing that a lot of those are key components to the Peace Corps experience. So remember that when you are thinking about skills and including skills on your profile, don't overlook those. These are going to be some of the most in-demand skills as you're thinking about AI and how AI might change our talent landscape. These are the things that AI can't replace. So being able to have these skills already developed are going to be great things to be able to include on your profile. And these are particular types of skills that recruiters can search for. So if a recruiter is looking to fill a position, they might be looking for somebody with great communication skills, great leadership skills. And those are all going to be skills that you've built through the Peace Corps. So making sure you include those on your profile is going to be huge. Okay, and I'm getting a question in the chat about how is analytics different from research? Great question. I think when we're talking about analytics, it's probably going to be intersecting data and looking to feel like this almost sounds rudimentary, but like how can you crunch it and draw insight from it? So being able to do that deeper dive that way, as opposed to just polling facts is more so what I'm thinking of when I hear somebody talking about research. Okay. And then last piece here is just to double tap what I was saying in terms of, you can see here that executives surveyed by LinkedIn are really highlighting how important soft skills are going to be to their organization in a world of growing AI skills. Okay, couple of more things that I will share as we're kind of bringing home the end of the profile piece here. And so first thing, I always recommend adding your industry to your profile. And when we say industry, sometimes it can feel a little bit confusing, but industry is the type of field that you want to work in. And by adding your industry, it's going to make it easier for people who might be looking to network to find you and to know that you should be a part of their professional community. And so when you're thinking about LinkedIn, one of the places where I feel like sometimes people can get a little bit confused is, for example, maybe I want to work in the IT space, but I work in the healthcare field. So maybe I'm an IT specialist for a hospital system. So my actual day-to-day job is that IT function, but my actual work as an industry is going to be in the healthcare field. So if that helps you when you're starting to think about what is your industry and how to really dig into what the industry should be for you. I know that's something that has tripped up a lot of people in the past. It's a question I usually get asked. So hopefully that's helpful. But if you have any other clarification questions around that, let me know. But again, the industry is really helpful because it's going to help your professional network know what to reach out to you about. Okay. And then one more big thing. So when we're thinking about you coming back and maybe searching for a job, if you are open to letting your network know that you are open to work, you can actually click, you'll see back here in this background, this little blue button that says open to, and then it pops up the screen that you can see right here. And what's great about the job preferences here is that you can actually tell recruiters what exactly it is that you're looking for. So you can see that you can say what kind of job title you're interested in, what kind of location. You can see start date, what type you can indicate if you're looking for full-time, remote, contract, temporary types of roles. And then the big thing to note here is on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that it gives you the option to put that hashtag open to work banner on your photo, or you can just share it with recruiters. And so depending on your comfort level, you'll want to make that selection there. everything on the left-hand side of the screen, so the title, the job location, start date, all of that is going to be available to you regardless of whether or not you make it abundantly clear that you're searching for a job or not. So know that you can still make those choices even if you choose to only share your information with recruiters. Okay, I will pause there. It doesn't look like there have been any new questions added, so I will save that last question. Does it look bad to be open to work if I'm still employed? That's a great question. So I think it's going to depend on if you want your employer to know that you're actively seeking, because if you do put it out there, there's that possibility that your employer will see that you're actively seeking. So that's really a personal comfort level. If you're thinking about rolling out of a program like returning from a volunteer position with Peace Corps, my guess is that might be at a time when you might be a little bit more comfortable with it. Or I have a master's degree, so like when I was going through my master's program, at the end of that program, I did have a current employer, but they also knew I would be leaving once I had my master's degree, so that might be a time when I would be more comfortable with it. But either way, it's totally open to you and how you feel about it, how public you want that to be. I think if you are open to your whole network, knowing that you're open to work, then it's great to make it public. And then the other thing that can be really helpful there is if anyone in your network sees the job that they think might be a good fit for you, they'll be more likely to share it, because they can only share jobs if they know you're actively speaking or if you're actively searching for it. But again, it does require you letting everyone know. When you say that it's just recruiters that should see it, it should block anyone within your organization from seeing that status. And then it says, is there a way to try to block or decrease the odds of a current employer noticing that you're seeking a new job? And so that is probably a good clarifying question as kind of a next step off of what I was just saying. So if you click that share with recruiters only, it should mostly, so it should filter you out anytime that your recruiters are looking through candidates who might be actively searching. Most of the time it will catch it. There are very few nuanced times when it might not, but for the most part, it should catch it, and you shouldn't have to worry about anyone at your current company seeing that. I think there's one more question down here, if I can get my mouse over so I can scroll. Sorry about that. I have two mice going for me today, and it's apparently not working out for me. There we go. Okay, is there a way to denote that you live in multiple locations, such as Europe and the US? I guess I would be curious to know a little bit more about why you would want to share that you live in multiple locations, to probably better answer that question. I think, for example, if you are actively searching for a new job and you are in the UK but wanted to move to the US, then you could definitely use this open to work feature to show that you're interested in relocating. If you are thinking about networking in multiple locations, I think that could be one way to do it. You might be able to show that by putting your job experience in one location. I might have to think on that one for a moment. I actually might come back to that. Caitlin, if you could copy that question and email that to me, I think I might actually do a little bit more digging so that way I can give a better answer on that one. Okay, and then we have going back to sectors and mid-career and looking to shift sectors from nonprofit immigration to a more data-focused career like data science, data analytics. I want to keep options open in both sectors. How would you recommend balancing that, different sectors in your profile? That's a great question. And so I think a couple of places where you could dig into that a little bit more. One would be in your summary section. So thinking about how are you going to phrase broadly that you're interested in pursuing a more data-focused career. So that might be part of your elevator speech, that for how many years you've been in the nonprofit space, you've really enjoyed working with people, but you know it takes data policy to drive change. So you're really interested in digging into more of the data science, data analytics. I don't know if that's exactly your story, but something like that might be a good way to start teeing that up. And then when you're thinking about the skills that you're adding to your profile, you could add some more of those data science skills to your profile. So that way, if recruiters are searching for someone with those specific data skills, they know that you have them. So that could be a good way to help surface your profile. And then I would also think about if there's a part of your job today where you're doing a little bit of that data work, can you share that in your experience section of your profile? So again, we'll go really high level in terms of why are you thinking about making the career shift? That would go in your summary about section. Then in your actual experience section, if you have any examples from your day-to-day work so far, that could be a good place to dig into that a little bit. And then I would make sure that you're adding those data skills to your profile. So that way, if recruiters are searching based off of skills for you, they can find them. Okay. What could I reshare the most in-demand skill screen? I will get the slide deck over to you after, but for the interest of trying to make sure we can cover as much ground as possible, I'm going to keep us going for now. I will get the slide deck over to you though. Okay. Can I explain why I discourage using bullet points under work summaries? I like to think of the work experience section as being more of a story. So if you think about telling a story, you wouldn't typically, you would give it more of that paragraph flow. If you really prefer the bullet points, you can absolutely still use them, but I would think about that as how do they contribute to your overall story arc in terms of how you're trying to share that story out. Okay. If I make another question here, if I make changes to my profile, will all of my connections automatically get an update that I've done that? Again, trying to avoid those at my current employer becoming aware that I'm updating my info and profiles. It'll be obvious that I'm gearing up to find a new job. That's a great question. And the good news is no, you don't have to make those updates public. So you should get asked every time you go to change something if you want it shared with your network. And so it's a little pop-up screen. I don't have a screenshot of it to share with you. So what I would recommend is maybe changing something small first, see where that pop-up screen pops up. So that way you know what you're looking for, and then you can go in and make the bigger changes. But yeah, you should be able to turn that off so that your network is not getting updates in real time that you're updating your profile. Okay, and it looks like this last question here is actually going to pin in more to what I'm about to talk about in a few minutes here. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a pin in that one for a moment, and we will wrap up the profile section. So last thing here then, I always encourage people to do things like adding location, education, we'll come back to publications and accomplishments to your profile, especially location and education, because those can be, again, really good networking pieces. If you are thinking about moving, or if you are new in a city, helping people to see where you're at physically. So if you did want to connect in person, that's a little bit easier. And then education can be a really great network as well to tap into. So I always encourage people to have that on their profile as well. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and pivot us. Okay, so I have a question quickly on location about, could putting a location actually hurt you, especially in a time of remote work? I guess I'd be a little bit more curious to know. I think at the end of the day, the location is going to be important for you because many of our remote roles still require some sort of location to them. So in terms of being able to get served up jobs that are a good fit for you, one of the things that our jobs will target is people based in the location for where that job posting is going to be. So it's going to be helpful for you in terms of surfacing more relevant jobs. Even our remote jobs are tied to some sort of location, so it'll help with the job targeting if you do have a location. Okay. This is great, though. I'm getting lots of questions today. I don't always get lots of questions on these, so thanks, and keep them coming. Okay, so as we're looking at going beyond your profile here, okay, so I've got a couple more questions that I will answer, and then we'll pop into the profile because I think they're beyond your profile because they're probably a little bit more relevant right now. Question number one is, if you studied abroad, should you include that under education? Yes, absolutely. Because again, if you might find someday that somebody else participated in a similar program at the same university. So I think that's a great question, a great way for you to do some networking. In terms of, there's a question about, if I didn't want to include a specific city, could I do a metro or area or region? Absolutely. I want to say, so like I'm based in Chicago, and I believe my profile actually prompted me to say greater Chicagoland area as opposed to just city of Chicago. And I'm currently sitting in LinkedIn's Washington, DC office. And I know for the DC area, you should be able to pick like Washington, DC, Baltimore metro area. So you should be able to, I would encourage, that's totally fine to do like the broader city metro area. And then the other question I see here is, should we complete the verify now? Okay, so the verifying your profile is designed to help increase a sense of trust for our members, so that way you know that it is in fact a real person. It's not required, but in a world where there are more and more chatbots and unusual things going on, the verify is meant to create that sense of trust. So if you are comfortable doing the verify, I would recommend it, because that it lets anybody else trying to connect with you on LinkedIn know that you are in fact a real person. Okay. And I see there's one more question that came in. I'm going to come back to the headline because I don't have a slide on that, and we will look at that in real time. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in that question for now. So when it comes to beyond your profile, there are a couple of things that you can do when it comes to you personally posting on LinkedIn. So here I've outlined the two types of posting. On the left-hand side, you'll see updates. That's where you're going to share things like articles, pictures, quotes, anything you think your network might be interested in. On the right-hand side, you'll see publishing. I will not spend as much time on publishing today because it's a little bit less common for folks to do it. But the way people typically approach publishing is it is a long form article. It's typically 600 words or so. And it might include it'll typically include a photo. And the goal of publishing is to share how you are a content expert on something. So when I talk to TA teams, one of the examples I'll use when I talk to talent acquisition teams, one of the examples I'll use of when they might consider doing a publishing piece is if they had transformed part of their recruiting process. So say, for example, one of the big things that they were hoping to do was to take 10 days off of the recruiting process. So they want candidates to be able to move through the process more quickly. They might choose to write a longer piece, one of those published articles about how they did it as a way of showing that, hey, I'm a content expert on how to shorten recruiting processes, because that's something that my entire industry is going to be really interested in. It's not something I can share in 2 to 3 sentences, so I'm going to do this longer form article. But for most of you on a regular basis, you're more likely going to be sharing an update where you might share, again, with your network, some sort of article or a quote or a photo, something that was interesting to you. And so I will get this slide out too, because this is probably another thing that might be helpful as you're thinking about posting more frequently, just so that way you have this. But you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, peak times of the week that are usually pretty good for posting on LinkedIn. You'll probably notice that a lot of it has to do with when people are more likely to be in the office, things like that. And then you'll also see notes that we encourage you to use the hashtag to add and include people in your posts, because when you do that, that helps your post go out to a bigger audience. So your post will by default be shared with your personal network. But if you include hashtags, that means that if somebody searches that particular hashtag, your post will get pulled into that search. And so really easy way to start growing your network too, as you're thinking about posting. And I have one more slide here on the posting piece, and then I'll come back to that question that someone had dropped into the chat. But when you are thinking about your post, the goal with your post is to really help your professional network hear some of the things that are interesting to you or understand where your perspective is, and then also to start conversation, help people think a little bit more about what is important, what should we be paying attention to as a professional trend. And so you'll notice here, we recommend making sure that you post in your authentic voice, because at the end of the day, this is coming from you. Post frequency, we typically recommend about 1 time a week, especially if you're just getting started. I know some people will post more frequently than that. I don't always make my 1 time a week, but that's my goal. And so if you do it consistently, that helps your network get used to hearing from you, knowing what you're interested in, things like that. And then you'll see here that we recommend including media to increase engagement. I can tell you anecdotally, some of my most popular posts are ones that include pictures or pictures when I'm with my colleagues, things like that. But I also like to regularly share out articles that I find interesting as a way of helping just share good content, things that I think will be relevant for my customers and also my peers. And then last but not least, industry numbers are usually a great way to engage folks. People might be surprised to hear, for example, how many people participate in Peace Corps every year. So like thinking about how might you use some of those industry numbers to help jumpstart conversation. Okay. And then we do have a question in the chat that I saw a little while ago that I want to come back to now. And that question is, does regularly posting content and using LinkedIn for its social media functions somehow make your profile more likely to be seen by recruiters or potential employers? So it's not necessarily going to, I would think about it from the perspective that you can, eh, it's not necessarily going to make your profile more searchable. It is going to help potential employers see what you're interested in talking about, though. So it can be a really good way to help people start to get some insight into how you think about things, what you think is important. Um, so I think it's a good way of helping just build your personal brand. And another thing to think about too is as you're sharing your profile more, or you're sharing posts more often, as people like your posts, those likes will result in your post being shared with their network. So it can help you get some of that brand build just by helping, by letting your network help share you out beyond your network, essentially. Okay, another question here, is it better to put hashtags at the end of the post or within? I tend to find them distracting. I'm going to go ahead and say that's probably more of a personal preference, although I too tend to favor putting them at the end. Okay. And then I also see a question about how do you avoid posting seeming more like Facebook? I'd be curious if you could share a little bit more, like when you're thinking Facebook, tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking there. Because typically when I think about like how I might approach a post on LinkedIn versus an approach on Facebook, is I would view Facebook as being more where I'm going to share about my personal life. So like trips that I'm going on, especially vacations, I would be more likely to share. Big updates on my family, things like that are probably things I'd be more inclined to share on Facebook. When it comes to LinkedIn, I'm going to share more things like industry trends that I'm seeing. I might share more articles that relate to either recruiting, building employer brand, how to create a learning and development strategy. A lot of the photos that I will share on LinkedIn tend to be of my colleagues and me at events. So for example, we did a big team lunch on Tuesday while I was here in the DC office. So that might be the type of photo that I could actually share in both places, but I would probably be more inclined to share that on LinkedIn. Does that help? Or if you're looking for more specific examples, feel free to drop that back in the Q&A and I can follow up. Okay, sounds good. That sounds like we got that question answered. Okay, well then, the last of the slides that I have here before I take us into real time is just, you can actually, if you're curious about some of our LinkedIn free upskilling resources, you can subscribe for some of our labor market insights here. So I have this little QR code in here. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to get that scanned, but don't worry if you don't get it now. Like I said, I will send the whole slide deck over to you afterwards, so you will still have access to it. But I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share now so that way I can switch screen shares for you. We'll go out of the PowerPoint and into the live website. Oops. I'm getting click happy, sorry. All right, so we would like to look at the LinkedIn website. And so I'm going to go ahead here and actually start us off with some general information. And I'm going to go ahead and change my screen setup here. So bear with me for just 1 second. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and start off with here then, and part of the live website is just showing you how you can search for other Peace Corps volunteers for other, so that way when you're thinking about from a networking perspective, trying to potentially find connections who might be helpful for you as you're pursuing job opportunities. So you're going to go ahead and actually start with the search bar here. So we can actually search Peace Corps in the in this job search up here. And then what I'm actually going to do is zero in on people because I'm looking to network. And so what you'll notice here is when I say I'm interested in Peace Corps and people, it's going to start off showing me people who I might already be connected with, who are past volunteers at Peace Corps. So that can be a good way for me to start identifying people that I could network with. I know, so Meg Garlinghouse is our VP of Social Impact, and she's also a returned Peace Corps volunteer. And one of the things she was sharing with me as we were talking about this presentation is that she's always more likely to take a meeting with a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and so are many other individuals. So this can be a really good opportunity for you to pinpoint people that could be good to add to your network. But something you might think about when you're trying to do some of this networking is going to be, you found people who are Peace Corps volunteers, which is great, but maybe there's a particular company you're interested in working at. So maybe I know OpenAI is a hot topic right now. So if you're really interested in OpenAI, we can actually cross-reference Peace Corps recruiters with OpenAI. And I can say, go ahead, show me the results here. And maybe Kim here is someone that I'm interested in. So I can actually click on her profile. And then if I wanted to send her a message, I can actually come in here and send her a message. I can connect with her. One thing that I would recommend is that if you are interested in reaching out to somebody, is that you do include a little note saying who you are and why you're reaching out. So in this case, I might say, hi, Kim, my name's Kelly. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm really interested in learning more about OpenAI. Would you be open to a coffee chat? Would love to just be able to connect. And one of the things that's actually kind of cool is we've added in a new AI feature where it says introduce myself, and it's going to actually draft a little message for me that I could potentially send. So know that that's available too if you are like me and occasionally get writer's block. Let's see. And it looks like still we've got a couple of the same questions over here in the chat, so that's great. So I'm going to go ahead and let's look at some live profiles now. And thank you, Caitlin, for volunteering to go first here. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up Caitlin's profile. And so Caitlin, I know, was in the education space when she was at Peace Corps. And so we tried to pull a couple of profiles as we have time today with some of the different backgrounds that our Peace Corps volunteers would have to try to give you some really good examples here. And actually, I think this might be a really great time for me to answer one of the questions that's in the chat. So I don't have a slide on it, but this line right here is called your headline. And it's meant to help people understand who you are and what you do. And when I think about my headline and compared to my job title can be a little confusing to people. I'm a senior account director. That doesn't tell you much about who I am, especially at a quick glance. And you might be wondering there, okay, so what does she direct? What does that mean, right? So my headline on LinkedIn is actually connecting talent to the federal government, because that's my role, is to help the federal government be able to find the right people for it. And so when I'm thinking about my headline, this can be a great place for me to expand a little bit more about the type of work I do. So for Caitlin, maybe she would actually choose to rewrite her headline to be more focused on amplifying a returned Peace Corps volunteers' re-entry to the workplace. She might tweak that a little bit, but where it's going to actually be more focused on helping people get the right types of resources as they're thinking about coming back into the workspace. So that might be one tweak that she would choose to do there. Another thing that I've seen people do here that's been pretty popular, sometimes folks will have kind of like a by day job and by night job. And for example, one of my colleagues used to say that by day, he partners with corporations on their strategies to find the right talent. By night, he's second in command to his daughter. And I always have thought that was a really cute, like little second touch, if you will. So you can make that a kind of a combination. Here's my more professional side, and here's my more personal side. Absolutely fine. The big thing I usually encourage people to think about with headlines is that it's typically going to be something a little shorter. Remember, we want this to be high level. Who am I? What am I focused on? Just enough to tease them and get their attention, kind of like a headline in a newspaper. We don't put the whole article in the headline. We put just enough that you want to read the rest of it. And so then I know someone had dropped in the chat that my issue with crafting a headline, and to a lesser extent the summary, is now that I've worked in various functions in industry and not 100% which direction I want to go moving forward. It makes it quite difficult to brand myself. Any suggestions for someone with varied public, private, and social sector experiences? That's a great question. And so like when I'm thinking about the headline, like the first thing that comes to mind for me is you might say something like you're a jack of all trade and understand all industries. So that might be something to kind of play around with. I do think there's a lot of value in being able to say that you've got multiple sector experience. And so maybe in this case, I would focus a little bit more on is there a direction that feels a little bit more immediate to you? Like maybe, because you can always change this, right? Like this is not set in stone. You don't have to keep it up for a set amount of time. So if this week you are feeling like you're leaning more in one direction, maybe try out something a little bit different and then you can always change it later. But this might be an opportunity to say that you're actively looking for someplace where you can plug in all three experiences. Because I do think, especially as you're looking at more senior level roles, having a variety of experiences can be really helpful. So without knowing your exact background, it makes it a little bit harder for me to think about what exactly the headline might be. But for your summary, you could definitely be focused on, I've got three types of experience. I want to build that out. Okay. I am going to come back to the last question up here too. Caitlin, if you wouldn't mind copying that, I used to see how I'm connected to a third degree contact that I want to double check on before I answer. So if you can pull that one for me too, I'll make sure I follow up with that. Okay, I also see there's when do you decide to have a profile in more than one language? And how often do you have to make sure they're synchronized? I'm gonna have to follow up on the second part of that question too. So if we could copy and paste that one down too, I will get back to you on that one. But I think having a profile in more than one language is probably going to be a little bit unique to everyone's situation, especially if you are willing to either be in a different country where they speak that language. I think that could be really valuable for you. I also know that some of the folks I work with are looking for people with multiple language skills. So that's one way to illustrate that you do have a multiple language skill. So I think that's probably going to be a little bit more of a personal decision, but especially I know someone had asked about looking for a job in Europe and the US. That's probably a time when you would want to consider both languages. Okay, let me double check. Okay, so what's the difference between following and connecting? Okay, so following someone on LinkedIn is going to let you see what kind of updates they're sharing out with their network. Connecting is going to show a relationship to them. And so you would typically connect with somebody that you know, you would follow somebody that you think is an interesting public figure, but you haven't actually met. And so, for example, you might choose to follow someone like Bill Gates if you are interested in his work and you think he shares interesting updates. So you could follow Bill Gates because he's sharing a lot of content that you think is interesting, relevant for your network. But you probably wouldn't connect with him because you most likely have not personally met him, if that's helpful. The other time you might think about that's probably a little bit more localized is if you were going to a conference and you didn't meet the keynote speaker, and you probably won't meet them on and become first name basis colleagues, I guess, with the keynote speaker. That might be somebody else that you would end up following as opposed to connecting, because they might be a good thought leader, someone to know a lot about what's going on in their network. But again, you may not know them well enough to actually be connected with them. Oh, yeah. Okay. So great question here. Bringing us back to, I had said earlier that we want your profile photo to be just you, but your banner photo can help tell the story. And so I think the banner photo again is going to depend a little bit on who you are as an individual. So I can show you, if I flip my mouse back around here, I can show you mine really quickly. And so mine right now is done in celebration of LinkedIn's 1 billion members from last fall. Prior to that, I used to have our Black Employee Resource Group background up as a way of showing my commitment to BIG. I've also known colleagues who will put a banner from the Chicago office here because we're from the Chicago office. I also know folks who will put either pictures of some of the work that they've done, like maybe if there's a particular group of people that they had worked with as part of an on-site project. Some folks will put a picture of their family here. There's not a hard and fast rule here. I think it's more of a what feels like the right fit for you as you're thinking about developing your personal brand. Does it make sense for you to share more about the particular work that you're doing, or is there a passion project that you want to pop up behind there? Very much up to you. Okay. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I think I get 2 more minutes to answer questions. and showcase a couple of things. So I'm going to bring us back over to Caitlin's profile here, just so that way we can try to take a look at a couple of more things in real time. Okay, so great here. You can see this is the about section. So as we were saying earlier, about section at the top of the profile, you can see here that Caitlin's sharing a little bit about her role and the types of work that she's done through that role. Things that she might consider doing in terms of taking the next step. So she might add in something along the lines of, I'm passionate about communications and making sure that the audience that I am working with is able to fully understand the depth of the work that we're doing. As a part of conveying that experience, I've worked on these types of projects, again, very high level. So I've worked with copy editing, marketing, email, etc. And my future goal is to do X, Y, and Z. So that might be something that she would choose to include in there. I love that I'm dependable, detail-oriented, and collaborative. That helps me get a little bit more insight into who she is. And as you're thinking about making new connections, maybe she would take that part a step further and say, I'm always excited to make new connections across the media industry, or I'm always excited to make new connections across the nonprofit industry. Like, encouraging people to think a little bit more about who she might be interested in connecting with. And maybe if there's a particular topic, like say, for example, Caitlin was really interested in exploring TikTok and how can we use TikTok for storytelling? Maybe she would even say, I'm thinking about how to build out a bigger TikTok strategy. And if you have ideas, let's connect. So there are a couple of different things she might include in there like that. And last thing, then we'll just take a quick look at work experience here. So this, I think, could be a great opportunity for Caitlin to try out the 2 paragraphs suggestion that I had shared in terms of maybe high level. Her first couple of sentences for her Peace Corps role might actually be something like, I helped make the magic of Peace Corps happen. And give a little bit more about her specific department and how they play into the bigger Peace Corps operation, because I would be willing to bet a lot of people have heard of Peace Corps, but a lot of people probably don't think about the fact that Peace Corps has to have a staff to make everything happen. So that could be a great way to help the broader global audience understand that not only does Peace Corps have all of these great volunteers, but here's how, as an organization, we support them. And then when she goes and drops into her specific role, she might get more detailed about, I run X number of emails per week as a way of communicating out to our audience of X number of people, the impact or upcoming events, things like that. And I think I am officially back to where I'm supposed to give the mic back over to Kenya. So I will go ahead and do that. I know that there are a handful of questions that are still in the chat. So if we can make sure we get those copied down, I will get responses out to you. So that way, I am traveling today, so it may be early next week, but I will get the responses back out to you along with the slides. So that way everybody gets that content. And thank you again for letting me speak.
Kelly, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. I have been taking notes furiously, so thank you. If you have any additional questions about this webinar, please reach out to the Peace Corps Office of Third Goal and Return Volunteer Services at rpcv@peacecorps.gov. A reminder to all RPCVs, PCVs, and staff, registration is still open for our in-person career fair taking place in Washington, D.C. next Thursday, June 20th. If you are interested, you can learn more and register using the link in the chat. Thank you all and have a great day.
Actually, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I'm so sorry. This totally went over my head. Let me see if I can pull this background off really quickly. Just so everybody knows, you can put your LinkedIn profile on a QR code. So if you pop up your LinkedIn app on your phone, so I'm going to do this and hopefully it'll load and you can see it. Perfect. Okay. So if you come up here in this little search bar up here at the top and you touch in that search bar, so touch in the search bar, you'll see right here, there's this little QR code button. If I press that QR code button, it's going to give me a QR code. So then when you're networking with folks, you can actually easily scan your QR code and connect with people on LinkedIn this way. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to get in touch and stay connected. So if you're doing in person next week, just wanted to plug that for you so that you know that QR code exists. A lot of people don't.
Thank you again, Kelly. Again, great information. See you all next week.